Marcans diechov de luna pervimi, I castronasos prosoto zilito togo, shtaboi raskazate tu Astoria. Hey, comrade, how about in English for the rest of us? Kirby shouted out, interrupting the presentation. Alexei glared at Kirby from the corner of his eyes, refusing to turn his head away from the rest of those in attendance. Kirby was laughing while leaning back in his chair and propping his feet up on the long meeting room table that sat perpendicular to Alexei in the projector screen. Mark Kirby, the American, or just Kirby as most of the team referred to him as. When Moscow decided to bring other countries in on the situation, Alexei wouldn't have guessed someone like him would be selected to join the team. Was this truly the best the Americans could produce? At least Kirby was sitting on the end, so he didn't have to look at him much. Alexei closed his eyes, taking a deep breath before exhaling loudly, obviously annoyed with the request. The Americans didn't make it to the moon first. He opened his eyes, meeting Kirby's gaze. Their astronauts just lived to tell the story. Kirby waved his hand dismissively, as if to say, "You're full of it." Alexei smiled slightly, probably unnoticeable to the four audience members. Long before Neil Armstrong walked on the lunar surface, we reached the moon. The Soviet Luna program deployed a number of probes between 1959 and 1976 to significantly expand our understanding of our satellite. The Luna 1 probe performed the first successful flyby of the moon. More significantly, Luna 2 became the first human artifact to reach the moon when it crashed near the Sea of Serenity on September 14, 1959. Later that year, the Luna 3 probe took the first photographs of the far side of the moon. And in 1966, Luna 9 achieved the first soft landing of an object on the moon and transmitted the first close-up photos of the lunar surface. I'm sorry, but were we brought here just for a lesson in Soviet accomplishments? We already know all of this. The space race has been the most widely publicized pissing contest ever, Georgina said, hand raised. All of this is public knowledge, yes. But what you wouldn't have heard on the news was that when our researchers examined the photos taken by Luna 3, they made a shocking and seemingly impossible observation. What they saw was what looked like a cave entrance within a crater that had light illuminating out from its opening. Now, obviously these were thought to be the result of some sort of malfunction or other soon-to-be-uncovered explanation. Nevertheless, we wanted to be sure. Alexei clicked over to the next slide, which showed complex charts, complete with trajectories, schematics, and other various equations. Lunar 9's launch included an additional payload, a rover that was launched in secret. Alexei changed slides once again, revealing grainy photos of the moon's surface only visible due to small lights located on the rover. Incredible, said Tatiana, his female counterpart assigned by Moscow. Yes, but why keep this from the world? Asked Francois, sent by the French CNES as their representative. Alexei pursed his lips before clicking over to the final slide. There were two images. One of the cave entrance, which was illuminated slightly more than the surrounding area, indicating that the rover's own lights were being supplemented by something else. And another of a small metallic sphere that emanated light from what looked like cracks on its surface. The room was silent. Even Kirby had nothing smart to say. The grin leaving his face and his feet now firmly planted on the floor. What is it? Georgina asked, standing and approaching the screen for a better look. We don't know, Alexei said as he wheeled out a TV from behind the projector screen. But wait, you said that we were not the first on the moon. Are you saying you Soviets already sent a team to investigate this thing? Kirby asked. In 1968, we launched the first manned mission to the lunar surface. 4 brave cosmonauts sent into the unknown to identify the unknown. So, what happened? Francois asked nervously. This. Alexei inserted a tape into a built-in VCR on the TV and stepped away as the others leaned in. The black screen came to life with an image of what was obviously the capsule of a lunar lander. The image was grainy, black and white, and was filmed from the helmet of one of the cosmonauts. Something was obviously wrong. There was panicked Russian chatter and the camera moved quickly between different controls and instruments, occasionally landing on the other 3 cosmonauts, whose faces varied from confusion to fear. Gradually, a whistling could be heard over the panicked voices. It had been present through the entire recording, but only now was it loud enough to be obvious to those watching. Suddenly, the lander shook violently before the image went dark. A few seconds passed before the image returned. The helmet cam's timestamp showed it had been approximately 28 minutes from the last image. Everything was shrouded in darkness, but the recording captured what was obviously the lunar lander as seen from a few meters away. As the image came into focus, it was apparent that the lander had crash-landed on the moon's surface. The lander was on its side with a handful of lights shining in various directions. Moon dust was suspended in the air while pieces of debris lay strewn about. One cosmonaut hung partially out of the capsule, motionless. His visor had seemingly broken on impact. The cameraman struggled to get to his feet and attempted to turn on his lights, but was unable to, likely damaged in the crash. He slowly approached the lander, carefully skipping over debris only for him to stop suddenly. The same whistling could be heard from before, seemingly coming from his suit's internal comm system. The cameraman turned to his right and began walking away from the lander. He walked for a few minutes before standing on the edge of the crater, and within it, the cave opening from the images was seen, light faintly revealing the rough ground on the moon's surface in front of it. But that wasn't all. Another cosmonaut could be seen dragging one of his crew members unmoving into the cave. As the cameraman approached the cave, the recording got more and more fuzzy until it was nearly impossible to make out anything. But the whistling could still be heard. It was clear that the cosmonaut had made it inside of the cave, as the ambient light filling the screen was increasing with every second. The whistling had subsided and was replaced with what seemed like chanting. The camera panned over a large room before centering on the spherical object in the middle. Slowly, the camera moved towards the object as the cosmonaut stepped closer, his hands outstretched. An audible vibration was coming from the sphere, strangely detected by the camera's microphone, though the object didn't seem like it was the source of the chanting. Then, as the cosmonaut's hands made contact with the sphere, the glowing cracks began to grow brighter, so bright that the entire screen was just white before the recording ended entirely. Alexei turned off the TV and sat down, letting the others process what they had seen. The first time he had seen it, he needed time too. After a minute, Georgina spoke. "This is crazy. What the hell was that thing? And those sounds. Did you hear that? It sounded like monks chanting or something." "That's impossible. All of this. Alexei, is this some kind of joke?" Kirby stood up, pushing his chair out from under him. Alexei raised his hand. "I assure you it's not. We do not take the deaths of these men lightly. They discovered something incredible, and we are going to make sure their deaths were not in vain. We are going to figure out what happened to the crew and catalog everything we can about the object. That is why you are all here. The best and the brightest of your respective countries brought together for all mankind in what may be our greatest discovery. Your countries have provided scientists, technology, data, and you. Surely, you understand the gravity of this situation.
You're right, Francois interrupted. This is fascinating, but this footage is from over 20 years ago. How do you know we won't meet whatever fate fell upon our predecessors?
Alexei stood up and smoothed out his uniform. We don't. With that, he left the room, Tatiana following closely behind. The team had been sitting in the room for about 20 minutes. A cart of food had been rolled into the room and the team was eating quietly.
Well, what do you all think?
Georgina asked, breaking the silence.
I think the comrade is full of shit, Kirby scoffed. Aggression isn't going to solve anything, Mark. It certainly won't help us understand this situation any more than we do now,
Francois said, rubbing his face with his hands.
Kirby, I won't tell you how I know this, but didn't your NASA encounter a strange signal when your astronauts orbited the moon back in '69?
Kirby looked at Georgina, seemingly deciding whether or not to question her on how she knew this classified info. He shrugged and sat back. Audio from Apollo 10, which orbited the moon, contained what the astronauts on board described as music. Of course, we all thought they were just hearing interference or something, but the eggheads who analyzed the audio couldn't explain it.
Do you think this is a whistling that's what your astronauts heard?
She asked. Kirby shrugged, shaking his head. Look, I don't know any more than you do about what's going on. I never even heard the recording from Apollo 10. Just then, Alexei's voice projected over an intercom. Okay, comrades. It's time to get you acquainted with your new toys. Meet me in Warehouse 3C. The team exchanged glances for a moment before standing and following each other out of the room. Alexei entered his cramped office and sat at his desk, lighting a cigarette. Tatiana followed in closely afterwards, pausing to survey the room. There was one bookshelf against the wall to the left which was sloppily filled with textbooks, encyclopedias, and loose papers. Some had even fallen from the bookshelf and lay on the floor. The only sources of light in the room were a single bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling and a desk lamp. Alexei's desk was directly in front of her with a chair on either side. To the right was a large chalkboard, which had two writings and images all over it. Nothing specific but what you'd expect to see in a scientist's office. Though, Alexei was no scientist. He was former KGB and was transferred to lead the boots on the ground team, partly because of his piloting experience and his reputation in Moscow, and partly because of his unwavering loyalty to the Soviet Union. What do you think? Alexei asked as he flipped through some dossiers while taking a drag from his cigarette.
About that, Comrade Aksinov?
Tatiana asked, unsure why he was addressing her in English. Perhaps a test of her fluency? What do you think about the team?
Well,
she said, taking a seat.
They aren't Russian, that's for sure. Surely Moscow could have sent in...
She was abruptly interrupted. This is how it has to be done. We couldn't do this mission without the resources from the West, and in return we are allowing them to participate. He took another drag.
Well, in that case...
She looked down at the clipboard. She had been taking meticulous notes throughout the briefing. And she began her report back in solid, fluent English. Georgina Metz, age 32, studied medicine at Harvard University, smart, confident, calculating. She's actually really great. Have you read her research paper on... Alexei waved at her to continue. She flipped to the next page. Francois LeBlanc, age 48, mechanical engineer, University of Cambridge.
joined the French National Center for Space Studies 18 years ago. Quiet, intuitive, and ready to be led. He loves his country and will do anything asked of him. She flipped to the last page. Mark Kirby, age 33, mining and mineral engineer and U.S. Army officer. Crass, brutish, and untrusting of the Soviet Union, but damn good at what he does. Tatiana flipped back to the first page and handed her clipboard over to Alexei. She smiled to herself, proud of how far her English had come since being in the States. He thanked her and examined the notes, going back between them and the official dossiers for a few minutes before glancing up at her. He then laid the clipboard to the side, checked his watch, and paused for a moment before asking, Comrade Markov, why are you here? She was taken aback by the question. Was he not impressed with her qualifications? Did he think she was too young, too experienced at only 26? As you know, I was the one who translated the voices in the audio. Linguists and anthropologists all over the Union couldn't, but I did. What if you encounter more writing or more voices? You need me. Not here, but there. I want to be there. The others have skills, sure, but they don't understand like I do. I mean, we haven't even told them. I want to do this for the Union. For all mankind. She fell silent, looking for Alexei to react. He shook his head slightly. No, comrade. Why are you here? He gestured to the chair she was sitting in. It is 6:15 p.m. You were supposed to get the team to Warehouse 3C. She put her hand up to her mouth. Voltermo. Alexei put out his cigarette with 3 quick jabs into his ashtray before picking up the phone on his desk and dialing. Tatiana stood and quickly left the room. As she did, Alexei spoke over the intercom. Okay, comrades. It's time to get you acquainted with your new toys. Meet me in Warehouse 3C. Tatiana quickened her pace. Francois, Georgina, and Kirby traveled down the hallway. They were careful to follow the signs which directed them to Warehouse 3C, as this facility was huge and they did not want to spend the next hour getting lost and backtracking. Wish they at least sent someone to escort us, Francois thought out loud as he walked through hallway after hallway with the others. While walking, he began reflecting on the whirlwind of events that had transpired. It was only 16 hours ago that he was sleeping soundly with his wife before being awoken suddenly by a knock on the door of his 2-bedroom apartment. The knock had startled his infant daughter Marie awake. When she began to cry, his wife Elizabeth sat up to rock her crib. Frustrated by the situation, Francois crossed his apartment and answered the door. On the other side were 2 men in military uniforms. One of the men immediately handed him a piece of paper while the other spoke. Francois Leblanc? Yes, Francois said, looking down at the paper in his hands. You are to come with us. You have been selected to participate in a secret top mission collaboration with other countries on behalf of France and the National Center for Space Studies. Pack a single bag of essentials and meet us outside. Both men turned and quickly walked away. Francois was dumbfounded. He looked down at the paper again. It was an official order from the president himself, co-signed by the head of the NCSS. There were no additional details. Within 5 minutes, Francois was packed and saying goodbye to his wife and daughter, who were now both crying. How can they just make you leave your family? Your newborn daughter? How can they just take you away in the middle of the night? Elizabeth whimpered through tears. They wouldn't be here if it weren't tremendously important, honey. They probably just need some emergency consulting regarding some sort of new experimental tech they're working on with NASA or something. Do not worry, my love. I will be back soon. Everything is okay. Shavu Saim. With that, he kissed his wife, said goodbye to his still crying daughter, and exited the apartment. He was driven directly to a small airfield
and then ushered aboard a military transport plane along with other similarly dazed personnel and multiple crates of equipment. This must have been more serious than he initially thought. What had he been asked to help with? Was he lying to his wife and himself when he said there was nothing to worry about? Francois leaned back in his chair and buckled in, shaking the thoughts out of his head. There is no point in dwelling on that now. Francois was ready to serve his country however he could, but he would be lying to himself if he didn't acknowledge the knot that began to form in his stomach.
Hello, to Francois,
Georgina said melodically as she gave him a tap on the shoulder. Oh, sorry. What was that? Francois said, seemingly coming back to here and now.
Do you have anyone back home?
Yes, a wife and a daughter.
I bet they're very proud of you,
she said, thinking how nice it must be to have someone feel that way about you. She looked over to ask Francois another question, but he seemed to have retreated back into his own thoughts, so she decided to leave him be. After a few minutes, they turned a corner and arrived in yet another long hallway with brick walls and a dark concrete floor. She knew they were in the right place when she saw Tatiana waving them over to one of the doors about a third of the way down the hallway from where they stood.
Privyet, Syuda!
Tatiana yelled, continuing to wave them over. The group approached her and she led them into the room. When Georgina entered the room, she was immediately impressed by its size. She expected a stuffy old warehouse with crates and shelves, various mechanical equipment, tools, etc. Yet what she entered was a large football stadium-sized room with a few tables and crates sitting just by the door they entered. In the center was a lunar lander, and next to it was a moon rover. Incredible what the Soviets had done here. They secretly constructed an entire facility in and under the Siberian wilderness, and had done so in apparently record time.
Do the Americans even have anything like this?
She thought to herself. The group stopped at the tables. Tatiana walked to the other side of the table and joined a tall, lanky-looking scientist.
Everyone, this is Dr. Maxwell. He led the development team for everything you'll see here today.
Dr. Maxwell reached out and shook their hands. It's nice to meet you. Let's get to it. He opened a locker behind him and removed 3 pistols. To Georgina, they looked like something out of a science fiction novel. The Soviet Union began experimenting with lasers in the 50s and 60s. Its first laser weapons emerging in the 70s were fixed ground-based systems, Terra 3 and Omega. Terra 3 encompassed 2 different devices installed in Kazakhstan, initially conceived in the 1960s to swat down ballistic missiles in the terminal descending phase. The concurrently developed Omega lasers were intended to hit aircraft and missiles in the atmosphere. Omega 1 and 2 proved more successful at striking distant targets, but the system still lacked sufficient heating power and power generation. Designing a laser that could maintain a power-efficient beam over long distances is difficult. So perhaps, I thought, the solution was to get up close. In 1984, my team developed a laser pistol, a precursor to what you are seeing here today. It was intended for use by cosmonauts to damage the optics of Western satellites or blind hostile astronauts without causing hull damage to a spacecraft. Each pull of the trigger electronically discharges a pyrotechnic flashbulb cartridge stored in an 8-round box magazine. However, the laser pistols inflicted very light damage, between 1 and 10 joules of energy, equivalent to an airgun, and had an effective range of only 20 meters. The design did not advance beyond the prototype stage, or so we reported. Here, at this facility, we continued our work and have created what you see before you, a true laser pistol, capable of viable use in combat. Yet again, as with the moon footage, the group was left speechless.
As you can see,
we do great work here, Tatiana said proudly, standing a little taller. Hell yes. This is awesome. I can't wait to tell the crew back in the States about this. Kirby grabbed one of the pistols and began aiming with it, pointing it towards a stack of crates behind the tables. Georgina inspected one as well,
This is truly remarkable, Doctor. Why are they so large, though? Won't these be difficult to carry and handle? Well, we constructed this with your EVA suits and the moon's lesser gravity in mind. The pistols will rest snugly in your gloved hands, and the weight will not be an issue. The size is because we do not yet have the technology to make it any more compact. But an additional feature of this device is that since these are not projectile-based weapons, there is no recoil to worry about. Truly, the best defense a cosmonaut could ask for. Well, aside from the suit, Dr. Maxwell said. Georgina stepped back. Wait, are you all expecting we will need to use these? She asked Tatiana. Better to have it and not need it, than need it and not have it, Alexei said as he entered the warehouse. After all, we wouldn't want to equip our heroes with anything but the best. That is true Soviet hospitality. Regardless, these pistols have uses beyond that of a traditional pistol. They can work to cut out or heat objects, and can even create small holes through rock and minerals with enough shots, Dr. Maxwell said, nodding towards Alexei as he approached. Have we given them the rundown of their transportation? Alexei asked. We were just about to, Comrade Aksionov. The group walked together to the center of the room where the two vehicles were located. One was a lunar lander, and the other a rover. Neither unlike that of the ones the Americans used when landing on the moon. The only immediately identifiable difference was a large metal box affixed to the back of the rover, and attached to that a long barrel ran from the back of the vehicle, down the middle, pointing out the front. It looked out of place even to Georgina. What is that for, Doctor? She inquired. That, Frau Metz, is for Mr. Kirby. A drill capable of cutting through the toughest material we know of. This is how you will regain access to the artifact's chamber. Enough about that, Alexei interjected. We will run through various scenarios and training for both of these. We need each of you to be able to confidently operate and troubleshoot them in case something goes wrong. And what about the shuttle itself? Asked Francois. Alexei shook his head. I am the pilot. It would take too long to train you all on how to operate it. Besides, this gives us some assurances. Assurances? What assurances? Asked Kirby. He means that it ensures his safety, that we protect his life by any means necessary, because without him, none of us are going home. Georgina answered, crossing her arms and looking at Alexei. She hadn't decided if she trusted him yet, but she certainly respected him. What have I gotten myself into? She thought. Alexei began taking off his coat, handing it to Dr. Maxwell. All right, it's time to suit up and begin your training. This mission is on a tight schedule and I will not throw things off track with idle chit-chat. This is too important. Important for who, Alexei? You? Your scientists? Moscow? Alexei looked into Georgina's eyes, his eyes filled with determination. This mission is bigger than any of us. It is vitally important that we accomplish what we are setting out to do. Find our lost team and regain access to the artifact. Not for me, not for us. For all mankind. A loud ringing was all Alexei could hear. Darkness was all that he could see. He tried to move, but there was an immense weight holding his body down. He could barely breathe. He couldn't move. Eventually, after moments of panic that felt like hours, he could feel the weight above him begin to shift and lighten. Two men, in addition to Dr. Maxwell, finally pulled the largest piece of concrete off of Alexei. What just happened? Alexei asked, gasping for air. He pushed debris off his chest and took Dr. Maxwell's hand. Same as in 1908. A massive airburst. The team and the objects closest to the deliverer have all seemingly been vaporized. Dr. Maxwell pulled the rattled Russian up. No. What happened to cause this? I thought we'd figured it out. What went wrong?
He demanded answers. Answers that he knew Dr. Maxwell couldn't possibly have. He looked through the destroyed wall of the bunker they had been using as an observation post and surveyed the scene. The spherical object, designated Deliverer by the team, was sitting on the ground at the center of chaos. The research camp that surrounded the object had been hit with an airburst with winds likely faster than any ever seen on Earth, and an initial blast surpassing the destructive force of a few thousand tons of TNT. There were tents, supplies, trucks, and bodies strewn about. Observation teams that surrounded the far perimeter of the camp had begun attending to the wounded, bagging the bodies, and retrieving research material and supplies.
"This is a travesty,"
Dr. Maxwell whispered. Alexei turned away from the scene and sat down on an overturned barrel that had held their drinking water. It was now almost empty, leaking through a dozen holes created by rocks that had punctured it from the blast. 52 years, and still no progress. The Tunguska event was a catastrophe I promised myself would never happen again under my watch when I took over 3 years ago. He rubbed a cut on his forehead and looked at the blood on his fingers.
"This isn't your fault. This isn't anyone's fault. We are simply dealing with technology centuries beyond what we could possibly understand. We can't give up. We clean up and start again. For all mankind. We are out of time. We don't have another 50 years. Hell, if we are correct, we only have 30 years until everything is gone. Based on your calculations, the year 2000 will bring with it a cosmic event unlike anything humanity has seen. Based on what Comrade Markov has been able to translate, this is an event that will wipe us out. Don't you understand, Doctor? We are working to save the human race. We cannot fail again. We just can't." There were a few minutes of silence in the destroyed bunker, with only the sounds coming from the center of the camp. Shouting echoed off the bunker walls, both the barking of orders by cleanup crews and cries of pain from the wounded. "Doctor, I believe it's time to loop you in on something." Alexei looked up, meeting Dr. Maxwell's eyes. "Last year, our Luna 2 probe detected a frequency similar to the one from the Deliverer, emanating from a crater on the moon. We believe that there is another device. As we speak, a team is working to confirm our theory." "Really? That's incredible. I wonder how many there are. Could that mean other planets and moons in our solar system have them too? This would mean those that built them had expanded past their home planet. Perhaps Earth isn't even where they're from." "Doctor," Alexei snapped, bringing Dr. Maxwell out of his tirade. "Sorry. You mentioned a team hopes to confirm this. How would they do that?" Dr. Maxwell asked. "We plan to land a rover on the moon, followed by boots on the ground if we get confirmation. The thought is, maybe this device can be retrieved or interacted with to give us new insight into what must be done. Maybe it isn't another device at all, but something else to theirs entirely." Dr. Maxwell looked up, musing over this thought. "The point is, we cannot put all our eggs into one basket. The team will remain here and continue doing what they can. I will take you with me to lead our research and development team for the moon missions. I'm sure beating the Americans to the moon would give you a nice medal. The public won't know about this. Only if we succeed in saving the human race will our actions mean something." He stood up, taking a cigarette out of the case he kept in his inner jacket pocket, and looked over to Dr. Maxwell, who was looking down at the ground, obviously lost in grim thought about what failure could mean. Alexei lit his cigarette and took a deep drag before speaking. "Hey, Doc. You aren't an astrophobe, are you?" Dr. Maxwell looked at him with confusion before shaking his head. "Good. Because you'll be joining them. You'll be one of the first humans to set foot on the moon." "Can that whistling just shut up already?"
Dr. Maxwell climbed out of the crashed lunar lander and spun around to help his fellow cosmonaut, who was still in the seat next to him. The whistling sound is still playing through his suit's comm systems and the barely functioning audio equipment within the capsule. Get up now! He grabbed Vykov's arms and began pulling him out of the wrecked capsule. Help me out here, damn it! This thing is falling apart, you must move! He pulled once more with all of his might, but slipped under his own weight and slowly fell over onto his back, kicking more moon dust into the air. He swatted at the dust in front of his visor and looked up at Vykov's motionless body, hunched halfway out of the capsule over him. His visor was shattered. Blood droplets floated around within his helmet, and his face was blue and swollen. His eyes were wide open and stared directly back at Dr. Maxwell. He closed his eyes momentarily before pushing himself up. He looked around for the others. It was dark, and his lights did not seem to be functioning. They must have been ejected elsewhere, he thought to himself. He exhaled slowly and reflected over what just happened. They had entered close orbit around the moon, approaching their landing site, the location of the cave they suspected housed another alien object. They suddenly began hearing whistling sounds, projecting from all speakers within their suits in the capsule. After a few moments, their electronics began to malfunction. They lost all control. They crashed. Hello, anyone? This is Natalia. I was ejected from the capsule. I'm not sure, but I think I'm just outside the target location. Does anyone read me? Dr. Maxwell was pulled out of his own head. Natalia, yes, hello, are you there? Are you okay? He exclaimed. Oh, Ethan, thank God. I'm fine, but I can't find Vykov or Pavel, she responded. Vykov didn't make it. I haven't seen Pavel, but it's incredibly dark here. We can only hope his suit is still intact. If he's alive and if he is awake, he will know his only hope is to make it to our target. I'm on my way. Wait for me there. Dr. Maxwell took a second to orientate himself before heading towards Natalia in the crater. After a few minutes, Natalia spoke again, but something was off. She was whispering. Ethan, something is wrong. Do you hear that? The whistling, it's gone. But listen. Dr. Maxwell slowed his breathing and listened intently. He could hear what sounded like chanting. What the hell is that? He asked. I don't know, but I hear it coming from inside the cave as well. They want me, Ethan. They want us to join them. Salvation, they say. You all were right. Ethan, they are here to help us. They are telling me so. We must go in. Her voice had changed. It sounded more fanatical. Natalia, what are you talking about? It does sound odd, I admit, but it's not a voice. We had reached the top of the crater and saw Natalia standing at the mouth of the cave. Just wait. I see you. I'll be down in just a moment. He began skipping down the incline into the base of the crater. Natalia stood silent and motionless, looking into the cave opening, which was pulsing with light. Natalia? He said as he neared her. She remained silent. Natalia, are your comms down? He asked as he reached out his hand. Before he could touch her, she spun around incredibly fast. Faster than she should have been able to in the bulky spacesuit. He couldn't see her face through the reflective visor, but he knew something was wrong. Suddenly, she raised her arm and smashed his visor with a rock. He fell to the ground and began frantically clawing at his visor. The impact had caused a small crack. His visor must have been already weakened on impact, but now his suit was slowly depressurizing. Natalia, what the hell? Why? He screamed as he kept one hand on his visor and tried to grab for his emergency supplies out of his chest pouch. She did not say anything, but grabbed him by his shoulders and began dragging him into the cave. He would have struggled, but he knew he had to prioritize the leak first. As he continued fumbling around for his supply pouch, he saw a figure appear at the top of the crater. It must have been Pavel. Thank God, he's alive, he thought. But he knew Pavel's comms had to be malfunctioning. Communicating with him would be impossible. Quickly, Natalia had pulled him all the way into the cave. She basically threw him towards the center. He climbed to his feet, one hand still on his visor. As he prepared to scream at Natalia, he was left speechless by what he saw. Directly in front of him, he saw the Deliverer. Well, obviously not the same one from Earth, of course, but the same sort of object. It was suspended in midair in the center of the cave. Natalia had her hands hovering just around it. Don't you hear them, Ethan? It's time we join them. For all mankind. Then, as she touched the sphere, he was blinded by a bright light. Everything began to shake. The chanting. Yes, it was chanting. Grew louder and louder. He blacked out. Hello all. This is Magnetar. I wanted to let you all know that this is a story written by me. This is parts 1 through 3 out of what will likely be a 6-part story. I did post parts 1 and 2 a few months ago, narrated in collaboration with a few other creepypasta narrators. However, after much thought and discussion with them and my audience, I've decided to make this a solo effort. This is my story, and I have a specific way I want the characters to be presented. So I hope that you all can appreciate the work that I'm trying to do with the story and the characters. And I just wanted to thank the former collaborators for parts 1 and 2. Those parts will remain up, so you can hear what it sounded like with more than just me. But the logistics and the timing and all of that to deal with a collaboration of this size over multiple parts, over what's now multiple months, it just became too much. So again, thank you to them, thank you to you, and all you subscribers and YouTube members, and everybody in my Discord. Yes, we have a Discord now. Link is in the description if you'd like to join that. Finally, I'd like to mention that I will be giving away that badge exclusively to anybody who becomes a member before August 31st. You can also see that in the description. Anyways, it's been an incredible few months. Look how far we've come as a channel and as a community. So thank you, and good night.